Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Praise Yahweh. Please be seated. I'd like to continue along with what the priest just ended with concerning self-examination. And the title of today's sermon is The Seventh Attribute of Yahweh, Forgiveness. The seventh attribute of Yahweh, forgiveness. I don't know how many of you have seen the new calendar yet. It's available for download on Yahweh.com. And it's all lined up with Yahweh's attributes. And the seventh one is forgiveness, which is be the seventh moon also. But this is something that we have to practice in the house of Yahweh, that is, being forgiving, and it's quite necessary. As a matter of fact, when we fail to practice forgiveness, it just causes ourselves so many problems. It's unbelievable. But let's look at Genesis chapter 4. Because as with so many things in the scriptures, you have to go back to the beginning to see where it originated from. Because the opposite of forgiveness or being forgiving is holding on to anger, holding on to resentment, holding on to grudges, vengeance, retaliation, and war. All of that is the opposite of what being forgiving is all about. And in Genesis chapter 4, this is an example that we have read many times. And what I want everyone to really notice is just some of the things that are being highlighted, not so much the incident that brought it about, but look at the reactions that are being shown. So reading from verse 5, "But he did not honor Cain and his offering, and Cain was very angry." So that's the first thing notice. Notice his reaction. You got anger. "And his countenance fell." That's the second thing, his countenance, his overall disposition. "But he did not honor," verse 6, "So Yahweh said to Cain, why are you angry? Why are you downcast? If you do righteousness, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do righteousness, sin is crouching at your door. The desire to sin is with you, but you must overcome it." And he's showing that some of the results of Cain's attitude, his actions, and so forth, these were things that Cain had to work on and overcome. Let's continue on to verse 12. "When you work the soil," so we know what took place in between. Cain ended up killing his brother. "When you work the soil, it shall no longer yield its strength to you. You shall be a fugitive, and you will be ever searching for peace on the earth." Ever searching for peace. "And Cain said to Yahweh, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Surely you have driven me out this day from the face of the ground. I shall not be seen by your face. I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond on the earth, for there shall be continual war, vengeance, and retaliation." So you see the pattern that is set here, a pattern of war, a pattern of vengeance, a pattern of retaliation. But you could see where it began. Now, I would like to read verses 5 and 7 from the Amplified Bible. So Genesis chapter 4, reading verses 5 and 7 from the Amplified Bible, and it says, "But for Cain and his offering he had no respect. So Cain became extremely angry, indignant, and he looked annoyed and hostile." Now, these are the attributes of Cain. So I want everyone to just have it in mind that the things that Cain is displaying and why we need to not be like Cain. "And Yahweh said to Cain, why are you so angry? And why do you look annoyed? If you do well, believing me and doing what is acceptable and pleasing to me, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, but ignore my instruction, sin crouches at your door. Its desire is for you to overpower you, but you must master it." So this is from the Amplified Bible, and this really sets the stage for what we have to deal with today, with what mankind has been struggling with for thousands of years. It set the pattern of Cain's way in rejecting Yahweh's law, set the pattern of holding on to anger, carrying a grudge, having an attitude of vengeance and retaliation, having a mindset of war. And this is a way of life that has come down to us in these last days. It's a way of being, where people are easily angered, easily triggered, and you have so many examples of it taking place at this time. But this is something, too, that when we come into the house of Yahweh, we bring the way of Cain with us. We have that same mindset of wanting to hold on to anger, wanting to be resentful, wanting to be angry, wanting to carry on wars and retaliation and vengeance, holding on to bitterness and so forth. And Yahweh tells us these are the things that we have to overcome. Now, let's turn to Exodus chapter 34. I'll get more into it. Because the only way that we could prevent ourselves from becoming like Cain or overcoming the things that was set forth in Genesis is to practice forgiveness. There's really no other way to overcome grudges, hatred, resentment, holding on to anger. You have to practice forgiveness. And this is one of Yahweh's attributes. As a matter of fact, it is his seventh attribute, and it's found in Exodus chapter 34, verse 7. If you look on page 73, you see all the attributes of Yahweh listed, starting from Almighty and going all the way down to forgiving. And in verse 7 you read, keeping mercy for thousands, forgiving iniquity and transgression and sin, but by no means leaving unpunished those who are guilty and so forth. But notice, Yahweh forgives iniquity, Yahweh also forgives transgression, and Yahweh also forgives sin. And we in the house of Yahweh, we are building Yahweh's character. So it's upon us to become like Yahweh, to have these same attributes that Yahweh has. Now, if you look at this verse carefully, you will see that there are three things that are being identified that Yahweh forgives. They're similar, but they do carry different meanings, so they address different things. So you have iniquity being one of them, and just for the sake of time, I'll just give you some rounded definitions of it. So iniquity, we know it's pushing aside the law. That's what iniquity is. Transgression is rebelling against just authority. That's what transgression is. And sin is referring to missing the mark. So these are the three things that Yahweh forgives, and these are the three things that we also must forgive. It's a necessity, it's a requirement. So the word forgive is 5375, and you see the word forgiving, and this is from the King James Version, and you can see that it's the Hebrew word nasa, N-A-S-A, and that has been covered many times before, but part of the definition is, I'm just going to read the highlighted portion. It means to lift, bear up, carry, take, and of course it means to forgive. So when you practice practice forgiveness, or you practice forgiving someone, it means that you're taking something off of you. You're taking a burden off of you. You're no longer shouldering a load. And if you think about confessions and why we confess in the house of Yahweh, that's part of the reason. Because when you're loaded down with your sins and you're getting ready to welcome the Sabbath, it's necessary that you take those sins off of you, that you lift that burden off. So you go to the priest and you ask the priest to forgive you, right? You ask the priest to forgive you. And this is what the priest does, because, again, this is something that Yahweh does. Yahweh forgives sin, transgression, and he also forgives iniquity. And it's the same way that we have to become in the house of Yahweh. It's just the same example that we have to follow. So let's move on to Yachanan Mark chapter 11. Because there are certain verses that Pastor gave us to focus on in preparation for the feast, and he said we need to study these things out in getting ready for Passover. And if you have been studying out these verses, there's just so much information in there that it's really amazing of what we are being shown and the things that we actually need to do in order to be ready for this upcoming feast. Now, in Yakin Mark chapter 11, reading from verse 25, this is found on page 773, and it reads, "And when you stand praying, forgive if you have anything against anyone, that your Father who is in heaven may also forgive you your trespasses. But if you do not forgive, neither will your Father who is in heaven forgive your trespasses." And this is really important for us to understand, because it's showing us the mindset that we have to have towards one another in dealing with each other in the house of Yahweh. That there should be a willingness to forgive your brother, there should be a willingness to forgive your sister, there should be a willingness to forgive your husband, there should be a willingness to forgive your wife, there should be a willingness to forgive the priests, the judges, the Kohanas, across the board, regardless of what we may be going through at any specific time. If it rubs us the wrong way, we should be willing to forgive. Now, in going through this, when Pastor was talking about this, you see this word, if you have anything, and he was talking about the oughts. Now, this word, anything, it is word 5100 in Strong's Greek dictionary. And if you could see it, I just have some of it underlined. It means any person or object, any man, thing at all, whatsoever, whomsoever, whosoever. So anything literally covers anything. It doesn't matter what it is. Anything means anything. Now this word trespasses is word number 3900, and it means a side slip, a lapse, deviation that is unintentional, error or willful transgression, a fall, fault, offense, sin, trespass. And from Thayer's Greek English lexicon, this word also means to fall beside or near something, a lapse or deviation from truth and uprightness, a sin, a misdeed. So what should we be willing to forgive? Anything and everything. What if someone didn't tell you shalom? Well, you should be willing to forgive that. What if they stepped on your toe? Well, you should be willing to forgive that also. It doesn't matter what it is, because when you look at the alternative, getting angry with a person and then allowing that anger to build doesn't portray Yahweh's character, because Yahweh is not like that. Yahweh doesn't hold on to anger. He's not vengeful. He's not wrathful. He doesn't seek to retaliate against anything, anyone, at any particular time. And that's what we're here for. We're here to build Yahweh's character. So we have to practice these things. So anything is anything. If someone has offended you in any possible way, we must be willing to forgive them. It doesn't matter what it is. Our key concern is building Yahweh's character. That's our key concern. That's what it's all about. Otherwise, again, on the other hand, what we'll be holding on to, we'll be holding on to grudges. We'll be holding on to anger. We'll be holding on to resentment. We'll get bitter towards that individual. And then in many instances, when we are suffering in dealing with one another, and someone is probably stepping on your toes so repeatedly that your toe is this big because they have just stepped on that. Somebody raised their hand. You're looking for relief, so you go to the counselors and you say, well, this person just keeps doing this again and again and again and again, and what you expect the counselor to that point is go after the person, right? That's what you really expect the counselors to do, to go after the person and tell them to stop. But instead the counselor look at you and say, well, what are you doing? And you're like, what? They're stepping on my toe and you're asking me what I am doing? They're the ones at fault, not me. But, the thing about it is, if you know yourself, you would know how hard it is to change. You would really know how hard it is to change. So to expect the counselors to change somebody, they have to be willing to change themselves. But you could also do the work also of bringing about that change. But let's get into Matthew chapter 5. Because what I want to look at here is what Yeshua showed us concerning the anger, because this is the first thing that comes into our minds when we are offended by someone. When someone does something that we don't like and we do not appreciate, here comes the anger. In Matthew chapter 5, verse 20, when it says, "You have heard," now notice this is Yeshua's teachings, his magnification of the law, and it starts off with murder in the heart, hatred. "You have heard that it was said by the people of ancient times, 'You shall not murder,' and whoever murders will be in danger of the judgment. But I say to you, whoever is angry with his brother will be in danger of the judgment." So here Yeshua equates anger with murder. And that's the reason why we should not hold on to anger against one another in the house of Yahweh. It's the way of Cain. Everybody get that? That is the way of Cain. That's what we read in Genesis chapter 4. That's how Cain started off. It started off with anger. And he held on to it. That led to murder. That led to him killing his brother. So Yeshua is magnifying this. He says, "You shall not murder, and whoever murders will be in danger of the judgment. But I say to you, whoever is angry with his brother will be in danger of the same judgment as a murderer." Just holding on to that anger. Again, anyone who says raka, insulting your brother. Now, what does this mean, insulting your brother? Well, it means exactly what is written there. When you look up that word raka, it's a term of insult. It's calling someone empty-headed. That's what that word actually means. When you say the word raka, you're calling someone empty-headed. Now think about all the insults that you could hurl at your brother, all the insults that you could hurl at your sister, and that's what this word is covering. You call someone empty-headed, no brains, dumb, stupid, foolish, because you're angry with that individual, because maybe they did something that they should not have done, or failed to do something that they should have done, and then he starts spouting out at the mouth. This is exactly what you're doing here. You're insulting your brother, you're insulting your sister. And just bear in mind that Yeshua said, do not do these things. Don't do it. Don't do these things. So again, anyone who says raka, insulting your brother, will be in danger of the Sanhedrin. But whoever says Nabal or Nabal, desire them to fall away, will be in danger of the fire of Gehenna. And what Yeshua is showing is how it progresses. It starts off with what's going on with the anger, then it's out of that anger, here comes the insults, and then eventually comes to the point where you don't want to be around that person. You wish that person was not in the house of Yahweh, because now they have become such a stumbling block to you. So in other words, the mindset is that you really hope that this person would fall away, would leave the house of Yahweh. That's what's going on. Those are the steps that it leads to. It starts with the anger, here comes the insults, and then here comes the desire that I would that this person wasn't here. And that's what Yeshua is showing, that no, this shouldn't be so among us. Therefore, if you're offering your gift at the altar and there's something that your brother, and there you remember, pardon me, that your brother has something against you, and remember this is anything. It doesn't matter what it is. Whether they have something against you or you have something against them, leave your gift there before the altar and go first and be reconciled with your brother. Well, before reconciliation, before you can be reconciled, you first have to be forgiven. You first have to be forgiven. And I know for all of us who do our confessions, that's the first thing that you ask for. You ask for forgiveness first, and then comes the reconciliation. You cannot have reconciliation without forgiveness. Forgiveness is a necessary part. So you have to forgive. You have to practice forgiving, which means whatever it is that that person is doing to you, or however you feel about the situation, you have to be willing to let it go. You have to be willing to let it go, because you just can't keep carrying it with you day after day, week after week, month after month. year after year. And that's how far sometimes some of these things could go. It could go for a long time. So it doesn't really matter whether it started today, whether it was done yesterday, whether it was done a few years ago. We must have the willingness and the mindset, whatever it is, to let it go. Let's look at Matthew chapter 18. Matthew chapter 18, and reading from verse 21. Then Kepha came to him and asked, Teacher, how often shall my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? For 7 times? Yeshua said to him, I do not say to you for 7 times, but for 70 times 7. And this is something that we all experience to one degree or another. Well, how often should I have to put up with someone's fault? How often should I have to put up with someone's shortcoming? They have been told once, twice, 3 times, I don't like this, I don't appreciate this, this hurts me when you do it, and so forth. And yet they do it again and again and again and again and again and again and again. And Kepha comes and asks the question, so Yeshua, well, how many times? And Yeshua gives a great parable, which I'm not going to have time to really go through the entire parable, but you could read through it for yourself, because it's an excellent example. But if you go to verse 35, at the end of this parable, now this is just to give a brief accounting of it. There were 2 servants, one who owed a lot, one who owed little. The one with the great debt, he begged for forgiveness. He was forgiven. Then he met his fellow servant who owed a little, and he had no mercy whatsoever on him. Absolutely no mercy. Grabbed him by the throat, had him thrown into prison and so forth. And of course, this was distressing to the fellow servants. And look at verse 35. What Yeshua said at the end of this, so also will my heavenly Father deal with you if you do not forgive your brothers his trespasses, offenses, shortcomings, and sins, every one of you with all your heart. So as we look forward to the great feast of Passover, let's just have these things in mind and remember to practice and become like Yahweh. So may Yahweh bless your understanding. I'll ask for everyone to please stand. I have the opportunity to present the great